You come home after a long day. The trash can is on its side, shredded paper across the kitchen floor. Something snaps. You raise your voice, you shout. Your dog's ears fold flat. Their body drops low to the ground. Their eyes slide sideways, away from yours. And in that moment, you think the same thing every owner thinks. They know what they did. 10 minutes later, your dog trots back, tail wagging, nudges your hand. You figure it's over. Forgiven and forgotten. But behavioral neuroscience tells a completely different story. Inside your dog's body, the storm hasn't passed. It's only just beginning, and it won't fully clear for another 72 hours. To understand what happens in those 72 hours, we need to start at the very beginning. Not with what you said, with what your dog's brain actually heard. In 2014, researchers at Eötvös Loránd University in Budapest placed dogs inside an fMRI scanner and played recordings of human voices. What they discovered was remarkable. Dogs have dedicated voice processing regions in their temporal cortex, regions that respond specifically to human speech. But here's the key finding. These areas process emotional tone before they process word meaning. Your dog hears how you sound before they begin to process what you're saying. And when you're shouting, tone is the only thing that arrives. A separate study by Ratcliffe and Rebbe in 2014 confirms something even more specific. When dogs hear a negative emotional voice, they turn their left ear toward the sound. Left ear routes to the right hemisphere, the emotional processing center. When they hear a positive voice, they favor the right ear, left hemisphere, the analytical side. Your dog isn't just hearing your anger. Their brain is routing it directly to the part that processes threat. So when you shout, your dog doesn't hear the word no. They don't hear a command. They don't hear a lesson. They hear a high-intensity acoustic threat. And the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, fires before the cortex even begins to decode language. It's not about the words, it's about the sound. And that sound triggers something your dog cannot control. But here's where it gets even faster. Your dog's brain processes a threatening vocal tone in about 250 milliseconds. That's faster than a human startle reflex. Before you've even finished your sentence, the cascade has already begun. In 1998, Bearda and colleagues measured cortisol levels in dogs exposed to loud, unpredictable human sounds. The results were unambiguous. Cortisol spiked within minutes, heart rate climbed, pupils dilated. The dog's bodies shifted into emergency mode, not because they understood the meaning of the sounds, but because their nervous system classified the acoustic pattern as danger. Here's how the cascade works. The hypothalamus sends a signal to the pituitary gland. The pituitary signals the adrenal glands. The adrenals release cortisol into the bloodstream. This is the HPA axis. And once it activates, cortisol floods the body. Heart rate stays elevated. Digestion slows. The immune system dials down. Every system not needed for immediate survival gets deprioritized. Your dog's body has shifted from living to surviving. Siniscalchi and colleagues documented this in 2018. The amygdala triggers a freeze response before the dog can even choose between fight or flight. That stillness you see when you yell, the dog going rigid, eyes wide, body locked, that's not obedience, that's not listening. That's the nervous system hitting pause. A temporary paralysis while the brain decides whether the threat requires running or submitting. Your dog isn't processing your lesson, they're processing their survival. But wait, if your dog doesn't understand the content of your words, if all they hear is acoustic threat, then what is that face, that look you're so sure means they know what they did, that guilty expression? In 2009, Alexandra Horowitz at Barnard College designed a now classic experiment. She set up situations where dogs were falsely accused of eating a treat they hadn't touched. The result was striking. Dogs who had done nothing wrong showed the exact same guilty look as dogs who actually broke the rule. Ears back, body low, eyes averted. The look had nothing to do with whether the dog had misbehaved. It had everything to do with how the owner was behaving. What you're reading as guilt is actually something very different. Ears flattened, body lowered, lip licking, gaze avoidance. In canine communication, these are appeasement signals. They evolved as a way to de-escalate conflict within a social group. Your dog isn't saying, "I'm sorry." Behaviorally, they're saying something closer to, "I am not a threat. Please don't harm me." That's not remorse. That's a survival strategy. Virani and colleagues confirmed this in 2004. The intensity of the guilty look was directly proportional to the owner's level of anger, not to the severity of what the dog had done. Dogs who destroyed an entire cushion but faced a calm owner showed almost no guilt signals. Dogs who had done nothing but faced an angry owner showed maximum appeasement. Your dog isn't reading the consequences of their behavior. They're reading you. You finish yelling, your heart rate settles, you make dinner, you feel better within minutes. But inside your dog's body, cortisol has no off switch. Dreschel published data in 2010 on cortisol metabolism in companion dogs. The half-life of cortisol, the time for levels to drop by half, is approximately 60 to 90 minutes, but half-life isn't the same as clearance. For cortisol to return to full baseline, the body needs multiple half-lives, hours, not minutes. One 5-second episode of yelling creates a chemical stress response that lingers in your dog's bloodstream for the rest of the afternoon, maybe longer. And while that cortisol circulates, it triggers a chain of effects. The immune system suppresses, heart rate stays elevated, Digestion slows, sleep architecture changes. Your dog walks over to their bed, curls up, looks perfectly normal. But inside, every system is still running on emergency power. The body hasn't gotten the signal that the threat is over, because for the body, it isn't. Protopopova and colleagues showed in 2018 that the HBA axis can continue firing for hours after an acute stressor. But here's what makes this particular situation worse. The stressor isn't a thunderstorm, it isn't a stranger, it's you. The primary attachment figure, the one being your dog, depends on for safety. When the source of threat and the source of comfort are the same person, the stress response has nowhere to resolve. And here's where it gets even more complicated. Stress between you and your dog doesn't flow in one direction. Muller and colleagues demonstrated in 2015 that dogs synchronize their cortisol levels with their owners. When you're stressed, your dog's cortisol rises. When you're calm, theirs drops. This isn't metaphor, it's measurable, repeatable, physiological synchronization, emotional contagion across species. Your stress becomes their stress, automatically. In 2019, Sunman and colleagues at Linköping University went further. They analyzed cortisol levels in hair samples, both human and canine, collected over several months. The correlation held over time. Dogs living with chronically stressed owners showed chronically elevated cortisol, not just a spike in the moment, a sustained elevation across months. Your dog doesn't just react to your stress, they live inside it. This creates a loop. You're stressed. You yell. Your dog absorbs the stress. Their cortisol rises. They develop anxious behaviors, pacing, whining, destructive chewing. You get more frustrated. You yell again. Their cortisol climbs higher. Yours does too. Two nervous systems locked in a feedback loop, escalating together, and neither one of you chose it. So, let's map what actually happens inside your dog's body during the 72 hours after being yelled at, hour by hour. Hours 0 to 1, cortisol peaks, heart rate is elevated. Digestion slows or pauses entirely. Your dog may refuse food, or drink water excessively. They may seek isolation or, paradoxically, press closer to you. The body is in full alert, every system recalibrated for threat, even though the threat was 5 seconds of raised voice. Hour 1 to 6, DeCastro and colleagues published a landmark study in 2019. They compared dogs trained with aversive methods, including yelling and leash corrections, to dogs trained with rewards. The aversive group showed significantly elevated cortisol levels hours after the training session ended, and the stress behaviors continued: nose licking, yawning, head turning. Even when the stressor was gone, the body kept responding as if it were still present. Hour 6 to 24, your dog falls asleep, but the sleep isn't the same. Kiss and colleagues showed in 2017 that stress alters the architecture of a dog's sleep. REM stages shorten, deep sleep becomes fragmented, and here's the part that matters most. During sleep, the brain consolidates memories. Positive experiences get strengthened during healthy REM cycles, but under stress, the balance shifts. Negative memories, the sound of your voice, the feeling of fear, get consolidated more strongly. The brain is prioritizing threat data. Hour 24 to 72, cortisol is gradually returning toward baseline. Your dog seems fine, eating normally, playing again. But Stellato and colleagues published findings in 2020 that tell a different story beneath the surface. Negative interactions with humans, especially raised voices and physical corrections, predicted anxiety behaviors months later, not days, months. A single incident may not cause lasting harm, but a pattern of incidents creates cumulative damage that compounds over time. But cortisol isn't the deepest casualty. There's something quieter that gets damaged every time you raise your voice, something harder to measure: the chemistry of bonding itself. In 2015, Nagasawa and colleagues published a finding in the journal Science that changed how we understand the human-dog relationship. When a dog and their owner look into each other's eyes, oxytocin levels rise in both. Not just in the human, in the dog too. This is the same neurochemical loop that bonds a mother to her infant, the exact same mechanism, co-opted across species over thousands of years of coevolution. This is the biochemical foundation of why your dog loves you. Now think about what happens when you yell. Your dog drops their gaze, they look away, they avoid eye contact. That's the appeasement response we talked about. But it's also something else. Every time your dog breaks eye contact, the oxytocin loop breaks with it. The bonding chemistry stops flowing. Each time you raise your voice, you're not just causing stress. You're switching off the mechanism that makes your dog feel connected to you. Mills and colleagues showed in 2014 that dogs develop different attachment styles, just like human children. Some dogs are securely attached. They explore confidently, return to their owner for comfort, and recover quickly from stress. But dogs exposed to frequent scolding or unpredictable anger tend toward insecure attachment. They become either anxiously clingy, never leaving your side, or avoidant, pulling away from contact entirely. Both are forms of relational damage, and if the pattern continues, if yelling becomes a regular part of how you communicate, the brain begins to change in the most concerning way of all. In 1967, Seligman and Meyer identified a phenomenon they called learned helplessness. When an organism is exposed to a stressor it cannot predict, cannot control, and cannot escape, something shifts. The organism stops trying. Not because it has learned the lesson, but because it has learned that trying doesn't matter. Research suggests this framework applies across species. A dog who stops reacting to yelling may not be learning obedience. They may be learning that nothing they do changes the outcome. That's not compliance. That's surrender. Casey and colleagues confirmed this pattern in 2014 with a large-scale survey. There was a clear positive correlation between punishment-based training methods and increased fear and aggression in dogs. The dog who becomes perfectly still after being yelled at, the one you think finally understands, may not be learning anything at all. They may be shutting down, the learning centers going quiet. The compliance you see may be the absence of hope, not the presence of understanding. Ziv's 2017 meta-analysis put the final piece in place. After reviewing studies comparing aversive and reward-based training methods, the conclusion was clear. Punishment-based methods are not more effective. They don't produce better trained dogs. But they do produce more fearful dogs, dogs with reduced capacity to learn new things. You're not teaching when you yell. You're turning off the system that allows learning to happen. But here's a question most people never think to ask. After 72 hours, when cortisol returns to baseline and your dog seems back to normal, have they actually forgotten? Fugaza and colleagues demonstrated in 2016 that dogs possess what scientists call episodic-like memory. Through deferred imitation experiments, where dogs reproduced actions they'd observed hours or even days earlier, the researchers showed something important. Dogs don't just store conditioned reflexes. They store events, sequences, experiences. Your dog can remember something that happened, not just react to a cue. Kujala and colleagues took this further in 2020. They found evidence that dogs encode emotional valence separately from event content. Your dog may not remember what you yelled about. They may not recall the knocked-over trash can, but they remember how it felt, the pitch of your voice, the feeling of threat, the surge of cortisol. That emotional signature gets stored independently, and it can be reactivated by similar cues, a similar tone, a similar context, a similar room. And here's the mechanism that ties it all together. When cortisol is elevated during the moment an experience is encoded, negative memories consolidate more strongly. The brain flags them as survival critical. So when your dog encounters a similar sound, a similar smell, a similar room, the stress response can reactivate. That dog who keeps misbehaving in the kitchen, they may not be disobedient. They may be reacting to a memory they can't articulate but can't forget. But this is not a story that ends with guilt. If you've made it this far, you're already doing something most people never do. You're trying to understand. And understanding is where repair begins. Remember the oxytocin loop? The one that breaks every time your dog avoids your eyes after being yelled at? It can be rebuilt. Nagasawa's team showed that just 5 minutes of quiet, mutual gaze between a dog and their owner increased oxytocin levels by 130%. In both, the mechanism doesn't disappear, it waits. But it requires something specific from you: intention, consistency, calm. The Castro's 2019 study had a control group that tells the other half of the story. Dogs trained exclusively with reward-based methods showed lower cortisol, more exploratory behavior, more play, more willingness to approach their owners voluntarily. The relationship between a dog and their human is not permanently broken by past mistakes. It can rebuild, but only if the method changes. Repair doesn't look like a single apology. You can't fix it by giving your dog a treat after yelling. Real repair is a pattern change, a voice that stays lower, a presence that becomes predictable, and something most people overlook: giving your dog agency. Instead of calling them to you, let them choose to come. Instead of forcing proximity, create space where closeness is their decision. That's how trust rebuilds, one quiet choice at a time. There are 3 signals worth watching for in the hours after a stressful interaction. Repeated nose licking, not after eating but in neutral moments. Yawning when your dog isn't tired, and avoidance of the room or area where the incident happened. These aren't signs your dog has forgotten. These are signs the body is still processing. If you see them, don't panic. But do notice. One practical tool: the 3-second rule. If you feel the impulse to yell, stop. 3 seconds. One deep breath. Your dog reads changes in your breathing pattern before they hear your voice. 3 seconds is enough time to shift the trajectory. Not just for your dog, for both of you. One last thing worth knowing: if your dog's behavior changes in ways that persist, consistent withdrawal, sustained appetite loss, or unusual aggression, these may signal chronic cortisol elevation. That's beyond what a training adjustment can fix. A veterinary behaviorist can help sort out what's happening. Your job isn't to diagnose, it's to notice. So, let's go back to where we started. You walk through the door, trash can on its side, paper everywhere, and your dog curled tight in the corner of the room, but now you know something you didn't know before. You know what's happening inside that small body, the cortisol flooding the bloodstream, the amygdala on high alert, the oxytocin loop gone silent. Your dog doesn't understand why you raised your voice. They don't understand the connection between the trash and your anger. All they know, all their nervous system has registered, is that the person they depend on most just became a source of threat, and their body will carry that information longer than you think. Cortisol, amygdala, oxytocin, emotional memory. All of it says the same thing. 72 hours, that's how long the body needs to return to baseline. But it's also the window you have to start writing a different story. A quiet look across the room. A low, steady voice. A choice. In the moment, it matters most, not to yell. Each time you make that choice, you're not just keeping the peace. You're rewriting the chemistry inside their body. And that might be the most important thing you do for them today.